Polyurethane, or PU or PUR, is a material that is found often in shoe soles nowadays, especially in sport shoes, comfort shoes, anything that has to be lightweight, because this material can be made at a very low density, because it is one of those expanded foamy materials that are very suitable for that. One other advantage of polyurethane in shoe production is that it can be injected directly onto the shoe. So no manual or very little manual labor is involved there. Maybe a bit of adhesion promoter on the midsole or on the bottom of the upper, but other than that, it's just foamed on and it's an automated process. Very easy, very nice for the shoe manufacturers, but the result is very often not so great for anybody who wants to modify or repair that shoe in question. There's many different grades of polyurethane with different applications in mind. The thickness of the outer skin also plays a role. As I said, it's an expanded material with foam, open cell, water absorbent foam on the inside and an integral skin on the outside. If that skin is thick, it's a reasonably good protection for the foam on the inside. If it's a little thinner, once that skin is penetrated, the inside starts soaking up water and that starts the degeneration process. Polyurethane, at least most types, are not very resistant to hydrolysis, are not very resistant to UV, to sunlight, to heat, to all sorts of environmental influences, and that can, in extreme cases, even lead to a never used pair of shoes with a PU sole to break apart on the first use if they've been in storage for a couple of years. PU tends to become very brittle, very crumbly. That is also usually the issue if you're looking at repairing a pair of polyurethane shoes. Once you cut through the outer layer, you grind through the outer layer, you find foam inside, you find foam that is often already wet, already moist, because it has already absorbed water. The degradation process has already started. So first thing, if this material is still holding together, if it's not falling apart, if it's not crumbling away, make sure that you have a good surface to work on. You don't have any crumbs, any parts that are already breaking apart. Those must be cut off. If the whole sole is falling apart already, that sole is no good anymore. So all you can do in that case is get all of that stuff off, rebuild the shoe, add a new midsole, add a new outsole, if the customer is willing to pay for that or the patient is willing to pay for that. In many cases they're not. But if the PU sole is still there and can still be salvaged, you still very often have the problem that the uppermost layer of polyurethane is not attached that well anymore to the layer below that and the layer below that and the layer below that. So what you do, if you just bond it, is basically at the first strain, you rip that PU layer off the layer below it and the bond just comes apart. Any Renia adhesive works on polyurethane, but you need to anchor it a little more deeply to avoid that effect. If you're working with Syntic Total, which is possible in a repair, you can do that. Syntic Total is also a polyurethane dissolved in certain solvents. So it can interact directly with this material here, reinforce it, stabilize it, and you get a very good bond that is really anchored well. Also, Syntic Total penetrates very nicely due to its viscosity and its chemical composition. If you cannot use Syntic Total, which is very often the case if we're talking about a buildup, you need to find another solution. Buildups, orthopedic buildups, are usually done using EVA, and Syntic Total, like all PU-based adhesives, doesn't stick well to most types of EVA. Sometimes it does, sometimes it sticks to, sometimes it doesn't, but most of the cases it doesn't. So you need to use something else, like our Top Fit, like our Ortic, like our Col de Cologne. But how do you anchor that in the polyurethane? That is why we make our green primer for polyurethane, bottle or can with a little green label on there. That product goes directly onto the polyurethane foam, directly onto the foam. It penetrates, it goes in, and then immediately afterwards you put on the adhesive and work as normal. Works with any Renia adhesive. With Syntic Total you don't need it, but it will interact very well with all the others. Why put it on immediately? First of all, it would react with moisture, with water. So sealing it in is actually a good idea. And then it also, if it's still fresh, it doesn't only interact with the polyurethane, but it also bonds and interacts with the adhesive, so that gives you an even stronger bond. I already mentioned primer for polyurethane reacts with water, and unfortunately polyurethane absorbs water. So if you're dealing with a worn polyurethane shoe, it is highly likely that that sole is full of moisture. So how do you get that out? Grind it open, cut it open, depending on what you're doing, and then you can either use heat or just let it evaporate. Letting it evaporate takes a lot of time. Using heat can be detrimental to the rest of the material, to the rest of the shoe. So the easiest and most non-destructive method is to actually press the shoe, press the sole very, very carefully, very lightly with some absorbent paper, like tissue paper, like newspaper paper in the press, and then basically just push the water out. The water needs to come out before bonding, first of all, because you want to stop that degradation process that goes on in the PU foam, if the water is still in there. And you also need to prevent it from reacting with the primer, if you're using that. Even if you're not using primer, if you're using Synthetic Total, the water needs to go, because what happens, PU can be compressed, water cannot be compressed. So once you finish your bond, you put it in the press, you press, and then the water pushes off the adhesive, pushes it off the surface, so it needs to go. Easiest method, as described, use your press with some paper, and that's that. Another interesting idea in handling polyurethane is to prevent this degradation from happening, or to actually slow it down a little bit on a repair job or on a build-up. You can do that by sealing the weak spots you just created. Once you cut through the outermost layer, once you cut through the integral skin, you expose the inside to the elements, especially to water. So in order to seal that again, you can use a bit of our Synthetic Total around the edge, just coat that, cover that, and then this will protect it a little